Good morning, as it is in Europe. I'm in Hamburg. Gemma, are you in London or somewhere nearby?
I'm in a little city called Ely in Cambridgeshire.
I know Ely, yes. I'm from Norfolk originally, so it's not a million miles away. In fact, I think the train to London stops in Ely on the way.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
How was Wimbledon for you this year?
It was good. It was hectic. We had rain delays, which meant things got delayed, and best laid plans about how the draw changed, and because they extended the draw this year, and so they added an extra day, but then that extra day didn't happen because of the rain, and so it was fitting more matches into fewer days, which was possible. It just became a little bit more busy than it was supposed to be.
On which court? We're going to begin with Alfie Hewett. And I remember last year there were some sort of groundbreaking moves from Wimbledon, putting matches on show courts. Was that the same again this year?
Yeah, so had the matches gone ahead as scheduled on the Tuesday, the first day, we were going to have some wheelchair matches on court 3 from the first day. As it happened, because there was no play on the outer courts. I mean, I was there on the Tuesday. There just was no let up in the rain. Everything had to move round. So we didn't have play on court number 3 on the Wednesday, but then from the Thursday we did. And we had like various doubles matches. We also had play on court 1. A little bit earlier as well. We had the women's singles finals on court 1. We had the men's singles final on court 1. So, what was nice to see is building on last year. So last year you had a big crowd for when Gordon and Alfie won, when the Brits were on. And you did have a moment last year when Yui Kamiji and Yiska Griffin took each other on in the women's singles semi-final on court 1, where the crowd got behind them. But that kind of built this year as well. So if anybody who watched the women's final between Aniek van Coort and Dida de Groot, they had the crowd behind them, the crowd applauding shots. When Aniek was behind, you know how the British crowd loves an underdog. They were cheering Aniek on. When Dida hit a good shot, they were cheering Dida on. So what's really nice to see now is building on last year and the years previous, the fans are really getting behind wheelchair players, regardless of where they're from. If it's a good match, they're going to get behind it. And actually, a lot of the crowds were saying to me, so Alfie's singles final was on court 1, but the doubles final was on court 3. And a lot of fans who had court 1 tickets were saying, oh, we wish the doubles final had been on court 1 too. So there's actually now fans saying, give us some wheelchair tennis on court 1. So maybe we'll see even more developments next year.
Fingers crossed. What would you say was your highlight of the tournament?
My highlight of the tournament, I think probably actually Ben Bartram's Wimbledon debut. So he's a local lad from Norfolk. He's also from Norfolk, like Alfie. He grew up watching Alfie at Wimbledon. I'm going to get in trouble again, and I'm sorry, Ben, but I remember sitting next to him with him telling me that he was going to be in Wimbledon one day. Then Stefan Olsson, the Swedish player who won Wimbledon a few years ago, great grass court player, handed him his towel, and Ben started crying. I'm sorry, Ben Bartram, that I keep telling that story, but it is quite cute. And unfortunately, I've known you since you were little, so you're going to get those stories. I've been reporting on you since you were little. You're going to get those stories come out. Now, he's done something with it. He's not got that hair anymore, mind you.
Oh, okay.
He shaved it all off. But the thing is about wildcards going into Wimbledon, and actually about Ben, you wouldn't have expected him to go out, especially in the wheelchair tennis in the opening rounds. But him and Dani Cavasachi, a Spanish player who we have seen in Grand Slams before, but we haven't seen in Wimbledon before. He's had a bit of time out for a wrist injury and stuff. They teamed up, and it was an absolutely electric doubles partnership. There he is with the shorter hair.
Yeah,
and they got through their quarterfinal. They beat Gustavo Fernandez and his partner Cataldo, which was no mean feat. It was an absolute marathon of a match. They came from a set from behind, and it was absolutely stunning tennis to watch. And he really made his mark, and he really made his, both him and Danny were wildcard entrants to this year's championships. and they made their mark, and they were like, we are here, we have been given the chance, and we're not going to waste it. They then got to their semi-final, and they were playing the eventual people who ended up playing Gordon and Alfie, Takoya Miki and Takito Oda.
Mm-hmm.
There were points where they, the match was on their racket, and actually, had Ben not gone flying, probably, if anybody watched the match, yes, Ben did go flying and became a spectator for 1 minute, and hurt his hand and stuff. I really do believe that they could maybe have won that match. They were playing the kind of tennis to win that match. And the excitement was building all week. Are we going to have a men's doubles final at Wimbledon with at least one Brit on both sides? Because that would have been exciting. But I think as debuts go in the wheelchair tennis draw at Wimbledon, Ben Bartram had a particularly superb one. And I think looking back, he would probably say that now. He was disappointed when him and Danny were, of course, disappointed when they went out on the semi-finals, because they know they had chances. And they know things conspired against them, and it just didn't happen. But I think looking back now, Ben should be very proud of what he did and what he achieved there at his first Wimbledon.
How old is he?
He is 19 years old. He had his birthday on the day he played his semi-final on court 3. So for his birthday, he celebrated by playing a Wimbledon doubles semi-final on court 3, which, I mean, it's not a bad birthday present, is it?
Yeah, not too bad, Gemma. All right, let's move over to Hewett, who obviously finally got over the line. I mean, when I asked you what was your highlight, I had no idea what you were going to say, but certainly a highlight for the British crowd would have been the landmark win that Hewett finally got over.
Yeah, I mean, I've been sat courtside for many years with Alfie in finals here. For a long time he struggled on the grass, and he would probably still say that grass isn't his surface. That's not his preferred surface. And there was a number of years where he wasn't making finals. The first year he did Wimbledon, he was out first round in singles and all of that. And so getting his hands on that Wimbledon title has not been easy for him. And I think that's what makes the win even sweeter to watch as a fan, as a reporter. Probably, I don't know, I can't speak for Alf, but probably for Alfie himself. And he spent 2 years in finals being ahead, having the match on his racket, and then his opponents just turned the level up, and it's just not gone his way. And then this year, he won it. He did it. He got ahead. He won it in straight sets. He made it look easy. And I think actually his record against Martin was, quite favourable. I mean, you heard Martin say it when, they played each other all the way through the juniors, and he never let me win. Please let me win one. Martin De La Puente, that's who he was playing. And what was really nice about this is actually Alfie and Martin did compete in the juniors together. So it felt like this was this generation's final, this generation of wheelchair tennis players' final. To see Martin get into his first Grand Slam final, he works so hard. Like, he's a player that works so hard on and off court. So he fully deserved that place in the final. The win he got over Takito Oda, I don't know how he did it. I don't know how he pulled out the reserves to do what he did against Takito Oda in his semi-final. That's a match that probably Martin will be proud of for a long time in his career. But yeah, it felt fitting that it was him and Martin playing when Alfie won, because there is a longevity of head-to-heads going through the juniors and the seniors together, going head-to-head on tour.
Tell us a bit about afterwards. Did you get to speak to Alfie after the match?
Yeah, so he didn't speak until after doubles, which was understandable. There was only like he had a 1 match break between. So I spoke to him after. When I spoke to him, he still couldn't compute what had happened. And you can probably understand why, because the thing is, usually, because of the delays, the men's final had basically been moved. Men's doubles final had basically been moved to the Sunday as well. So they hadn't played one semi-final by the time we got to the Saturday, when we would normally play the men's doubles final. So usually when you're interviewing these players at Wimbledon, it's kind of like they've only got one final on that day.
Sure.
It must have been really weird for Alfie. He's just won a singles title, his first singles title at Wimbledon, and he can't celebrate straight away because they've got him straight back on court preparing for doubles, which could be in 40 minutes, it could be in an hour and a half, it could be whenever. So I think when I spoke to him on the Sunday straight after the doubles final, he still wasn't able to compute it 100%. Like, he knew it was amazing, and he knew he felt amazing about it, and he knew it was he'd finally got the monkey off his back with that Wimbledon singles title that everybody had been mentioning so much. And I think we talked about that actually, and we talked about a lot about the Andy Murray documentary that came out, where Andy Murray said the pressure of being a British tennis player and getting so close to wins at Wimbledon and not doing it, the pressure on you, that when you finally do it, the pressure's released. And actually Alfie said, and I talked to him about that, and he said he when he watched that documentary with Andy Murray that said that, did resonate with him, because although, like, we have had British winners in the wheelchair tennis draw, Gordon Reid won the first ever wheelchair singles title there. I think the pressure on Alfie was maybe that this was the one Grand Slam singles title he didn't have, but to quantify his experience in the whole of the wheelchair tennis tour, so we're talking men's open, women's open and quad, there's only been 4 players who've completed the Grand Slam, the career Grand Slam, in the singles, and there's actually only been 2 men, and the other man was Shingo Kunieda.
Okay.
And so the achievement that Alfie has, what Alfie's just achieved, very few have in his sport. So it's kind of like, I think for years, because he was, US Open, he loves the courts in New York. They really suit his game style. Clay, he's a good clay court player. He was as a junior. Australian Open, we forget that it took him a good few years to get that monkey off his back and win singles, because now he's consistently in the singles final there. And so for a while, for a good couple of years, it's been, are you going to win Wimbledon this year? Are you going to finally complete the set? Are you going to, and I think, that's got to cause pressure on an athlete. So it was interesting talking to him about things Andy Murray had said in, like, his retirement stuff, to see how much that resonated with Alfie as well.
Yes, indeed. Let's move over to a legend of the sport, probably the biggest legend in wheelchair tennis, arguably, and that is Didier de Groot, who won her 15th consecutive Grand Slam title at Wimbledon. I guess no surprise, or when is this going to end, by the way, Gemma?
Well, she didn't have the easiest run up to this. Okay. To Wimbledon. I mean, Yui Kamiji beat her in the warm-up tournament, which was the British Open. So they moved the British Open, which is usually played on hard courts in Nottingham a few weeks after Wimbledon, to become a warm-up grass court tournament for Wimbledon. So it changed from a Super Series to an ITF1, and it became a warm-up tournament. And her opponents, they were making it tough for her. This one she didn't have easy. And so it's testament to how she can get herself out of situations. I think what was really interesting is when she played Anique. Anique is an incredibly good grass court player. I really love watching Anique's game on grass. And Anique had come through. I mean, she'd had some good wins too, so she was feeling confident. Anique said it in her post-match. Unfortunately, her serve was still asleep when her serve was still in bed when she came onto the final, but that didn't stop the final being an absolutely brilliant match. I think what was really noticeable about the way Dida played, Anique challenged her, and Dida knew you cannot give Anique that backhand. You cannot give her that backhand down the line, because she will do damage with it. And it was trying to avoid it, because obviously Anique's going to go for it, isn't she, if she's got even a chance of getting it. And what was really interesting is that the level ups of both players, so they were both reacting to what was happening in the match. I mean, you've got to look at, in both sets, Anique was 4-love down in the first set. Anique was 4-1 down in the second set. And then it ended 6-4, 6-4. So each player kind of was playing a brilliant game of chess. They were reacting to what was happening on court, and they were upping their level and changing their game plan. And that was what was really great to see about that final, because it was an interesting final to watch, because it wasn't players sticking to a game plan and saying, well, if I just stick to it, it'll eventually work. You were watching players' minds working in real time, going, right, okay, Dida going, okay, I was 4-love up, now I'm 4-all because Anique's changed the game. Now I've got to change my game. And so it was, as a tennis coach, it wasn't, I don't know whether the tennis fans noticed that as much, but as a tennis coach, it was interesting to watch as well for me, because I was watching how the tactics were being played. But the crowd were loving it. Like, I think they wanted it to go to a third set, if I'm honest. I don't think Dida or Anique wanted it to go to a third. Well, Anique maybe did, but Dida wanted it to go to a third set, because Anique was dangerous on 3-setters last week in Wimbledon. She would often make a very, very good comeback. So, but I think the crowd were wanting more, because it was such a great display of tennis. I think neither of those two players should be ashamed of what they put out on court one, because it was just stunning tennis.
Was there a match that stood out for you this year? I mean, I saw that Hewett had a tough battle in the semi-final, arguably tougher than he had even in the final itself. I think it was 7-5 in the third. Was there a match like that, for example, that stood out for you this year?
I think it probably was that match. It was between that match and also Martin's. It was probably the two men's semi-finals, the men's singles semi-finals. With Alfie, with Gustavo, obviously only a few weeks previously, they'd been at Roland Garros. It went to 3 sets, and it went to a tie break in the third set. And he, it was on his 6th match point. That's when kind of Alfie served it out. Okay. As a spectator, as a reporter who's watched Alfie, you were sat there when it was 6-5 and Alfie was like on his 5th match point or 4th match point, going, don't let it go to a tie break. There's going to be demons there, and Gusti's going to work on them. Don't let there be a tie break. So I think the relief in the crowd when Alfie finally served it out on his 6th match point, because it was like the whole match was quite intense. The whole match was quite intense. He went down. He didn't win the first set against Gusti, so he had to pull it back. And just, the intensity of that match. It was a really hot day as well. So you were feeling it. You were on court 3. Court 3, if anybody's not been to Wimbledon, is called the Goldfish Bowl. And there's one reason why it's called that. It is a heat trap. It is an absolute heat trap. So when it's really, really warm or humid, you, as a spectator, you're getting overheated, let alone as a player. And so as the temperature was rising, so was the tension on court. So it felt like the weather was kind of giving us the mood of the whole match, but which meant I think the whole crowd seemed to breathe a collective sigh of relief but from where I was sitting anyway. The minute that 6th match point came and Alfie, served it out, he wasn't the only one that was letting out a roar. Let's just face it.
I can imagine. All right. Listen, somebody who got the plaudits of Billie Jean King, or a pair, I should say, who got the plaudits of Billie Jean King on Twitter, I saw, was the doubles pairing of, and I'm hoping I'm going to say this correctly, Montjana and Kamiji.
Yeah, so Kotatsu Montjane and Yui Kamiji. They're proving to be quite a doubles pair. Like, obviously, Yui, British fans will remember Yui used to partner up quite regularly with Jordan Wiley, one of our players who's now retired. Now Yui and KG are becoming quite the partnership. And they're now becoming the partnership to beat on tour. They beat Dida and Yiska. I love watching them together. Like, their styles of tennis complement each other. When one's having a down moment, the other one's making sure they're keeping them kind of, up. And it's no surprise to me that Billie Jean King is highlighting those two. So Billie Jean King, for people who don't know, has been a big supporter of KG's for a long, long time. She's been a big supporter of wheelchair tennis for a long, long time. And she's often been somebody that the wheelchair tennis players can call on when they've needed advice. So when things have needed change in the wheelchair tour, like prize money or draw sizes getting bigger or equal draw sizes, often some wheelchair players have called on Billie Jean King for obvious reasons. I mean, you know, what she did for the women's game is phenomenal. And it's so great to see that she's now getting involved with the wheelchair game. And so KG is actually really heavily supported by Billie Jean King, and Billie Jean King has stood in her corner. And if you were watching that final, Billie Jean King was actually on court 3 watching them.
Okay.
Which was great. So the cameras kind of crossed to her briefly, and yeah, so it doesn't surprise me that Billie Jean King has tweeted about Yui and KG, because she is, and the great thing is she is, you know, her foundation, Billie Jean King Foundation, that's who's really supported KG in her journey, because KG's obviously from South Africa. There isn't the funding there that we maybe see in the UK or the Netherlands for wheelchair tennis. So she's been a big supporter of that. And amen. Long may Billie Jean King be tweeting about wheelchair tennis, is what I say.
There was more glory for Alfie Hewett in the doubles, I believe, this year as well, alongside Gordon Reid, so an all-British pair as well there, beating Oda and Miki, I believe, in the final, also in straight sets. So 2 finals for Hewett and 2 straight sets wins for him. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, not 2 simple wins for him. Anybody who was watching Gordon and Alfie in doubles throughout the whole week will know that second sets proved to be their nemesis. They always seem to go behind and either win it or take it to a tie break. So actually, it wasn't as straightforward as the scoreline suggests, because they were actually behind in the second set in that final. Okay. I think they were behind like 5-1, 5-2, and from what I remember correctly. And then they kind of fought it back to win that final. And so yeah, second sets were proving their nemesis. And I did ask them about that in their press conference. I said, can you discuss what it is about second sets this year? And Alfie did say, look, we did whatever we could to get the win. Which is, you know, sometimes that's what you have to do. And actually, Alfie and Gordon are a pair who, when under pressure, can pull out the results. So actually, you shouldn't be, if you were new to watching an Alfie and Gordon, I can understand that you were sat there, they were down in the second set, and you were thinking, this is going to 3 sets. But actually, anybody who's watched them for any length of time, as singles players or doubles players, knows, let's not worry till the set's actually been closed out, because anything can happen in this next sort of 30 to 40 minutes. So while it looks like it was straight sets, so it looks like it was a simple victory for them, and, you know, all of their other results were straight sets. The second sets proved to be
I mean, it was 2 hours, the final, even though it was straight sets.
Yeah, it's those second sets. That's what I'm saying. They didn't. Yeah, they love to cause a bit of drama in the second set. I think that's what it was. So yeah, so that's what they did. But do you know what? Sometimes you need a bit of drama in tennis. You don't want a simple final, do you? You want a bit of drama. You want a bit of tension. You want a bit. Oh, are they going to come back? Are we going to get 3 sets? I think that's the thing. Like, while they were playing, the Djokovic and Alcaraz match was on.
Okay.
And that was becoming straightforward. You know, at times I was, 6-2, 6-2. The crowd's got tension in the wheelchair doubles match that was going on at the same time on court 3.
Yeah. Was it okay to talk to Hewett about his singles win in the press conference afterwards?
Well, so I had a 1-to-1, so
okay.
I'm very lucky in that I know the players, and I do request 1-to-1s and stuff. And they're, to be fair, they're very, very amenable with it, and they do chat, happy to chat to me. So for that, I'm always grateful to them. So thank you. If any of them are listening, I do appreciate it. But what happened, the way they did the press conferences, because everything had to be at doubles, is Alfie had his singles press conference on his own, and then Gordon came and did the doubles. It just meant that Alfie got his moment, and then Alfie and Gordon got their moment. And it wasn't kind of, I think the way the All England Club did that was fantastic, because I have been at Grand Slams where we've had to do things after doubles, and it's become a weird mismatch of questions, and then you felt for whichever one hasn't made it through, because the other one's talking about their singles and they very often played each other. And so actually the way the All England Club did that was quite good. So each, the doubles got its moment in the big media centre, and the singles got its moment in the big media centre, and it didn't matter that Alfie happened to win both. So I think that was really well done. I mean, I was lucky enough to get a one-to-one with Alfie afterwards, to kind of discuss through some things mentally that he'd been going through, things like his granddad and what his granddad thought. So for me, like, I know a lot of people were going along the line, a lot of media was going along the line about his granddad being terminally ill, which he is. But one of the greatest things about Alfie's granddad is he gives you his own opinion of what the match was like. He's Alfie's biggest supporter, but he's also Alfie's biggest critic. So when I saw Grandad after the match, I asked Grandad what he thought of the match, of Alfie's singles match, and Grandad said average.
Oh.
So when I was in with Alfie on his one-to-one, I went, Grandad summarised your singles win as average. What do you say to that? But what was really nice is, Alfie admitted his granddad's his toughest critic, but he's been there all the way through his tennis career. He's seen him through highs and lows. He's been his taxi driver, and he has, in the younger years, you always saw Grandad at tournaments as his taxi driver. But he does know, despite his harsh criticism of matches, he's always proud of him. And that's the thing, that his granddad's been around tennis a long time with Alfie. And so he knows what good tennis is. And that's the thing, like, as with any sports person, my dad's my harshest critic when I play. When I used to perform, my mum used to tell me when I did a rubbish performance, and I'm like, I've got another 7 shows this week to make up for that one. You just came to the rubbish one. It's kind of that family dynamic that you get, isn't it? You need people around you who are going to tell you. So I did say to Alfie he had to win it next year and put in an above average performance. But it's things like that, and stuff like that. So so it's always useful to get Grandad's opinion. And actually, interestingly, I was speaking to one of Alfie's old coaches, Stuart Wilkinson, because he messaged me after Alfie won. So I think that was great. What Alfie did was acknowledge not just the team he has now, but the team he's had previously. Working with him to get him to this point, because it's been a journey, and it's not been an easy journey for Alfie. We need to remember that 3 years ago, he didn't know whether he was going to be able to continue in the sport. And now he's making the most of it. He even said, I've been given a second chance to do what I love doing, and I'm making the most of every moment. And I'd call winning your first Wimbledon singles title making the most of every moment. But I was talking to his old coach, Stuart Wilkinson, and I told him that Grandad said was average, and Stuart said to me, I agree with Grandad. So I'm like, what does Paul do? I'm just going to go in there and big him up. So it was and it was great because all his family were there. It was great. What was really funny is at the start, so you had one of his family members had a Norwich City football shirt on. This was before the match started, but one of the security guards was an Ipswich fan. And they were standing right by where Alfie's family were. So there was a bit of banter going on about Ipswich and Norwich there. And that's what created the atmosphere, there was just an atmosphere on court 1. And it was, we're not just talking about, interactions between spectators and players. We're talking about interactions between the Wimbledon staff and some of the spectators that just made, even before that singles final had started, it made it a whole celebration and made it such a nice atmosphere to be part of.
Over in the quads, we had 2-time defending champions Sam Schroeder and Niels Vink beating Andy Lapthorne and Guy Sasson, and that one did go 3 sets.
Yeah, that one did. To be fair, that one, I think that might be considered one that got away for Andy Lapthorne, because they did have the match on their racket for a lot of that match. All credit to Sam and Niels. They played, once they went a set down, they played some remarkable tennis to get themselves back in the game. It was, that second set, it could have gone either way. It could have gone to Lapo and Sasson winning that doubles title, or it could have gone or it could have gone as it did to Niels and Sam. That fight back from Niels and Sam, I think, has to be commended. You could see how much they wanted their hands on that doubles title the minute they went a set down. Like the first set was, it was all on Lapo and Sasson's racket. Something switched in them. Something like when I was watching it, there just seemed to be something switching them. And I think it maybe comes as well with being an experienced doubles pair. We've got to remember that Lapo and Sasson have been a doubles partnership for only 2 Grand Slams. They made it to the finals in both of them. But they've only been together as a partnership for 2 Grand Slams. So there's something to be said for Niels and Sam. They are, how long have they been playing together? And I think some of what helped them turn it around was the fact they know each other so well, and they know how each other plays, and they know how each other reacts to going down a set. And I think we saw that. And I think we saw the support went from Sam on to Niels when Niels wasn't maybe playing the tennis he'd want to at points, and Niels on to Sam when Sam was maybe not playing the tennis he'd want to at certain points. And it was that teamwork, I think, that teamwork that got them through, as well as their tennis ability. You can't deny that that Dutch pair have incredible tennis ability. They've had it since they were juniors. They've been ones to watch since they were juniors. We knew they were coming up to the quad division, and we knew they'd be dangerous, and we knew they'd take so many titles in their careers. And I think they did what champions do when they're under the cosh, and they brought their A game.
Tell us about this sort of familiarity with each other and why it's so important in doubles, for example, in wheelchair tennis.
But I think often you find it's very difficult with only a draw of 16 for countrymen or countrywomen to play with each other. You see in the women's draw that we only have Lucy. In the quad draw we only had Lapo. So as much as we've been very lucky in the men's open draw that we've got Alfie and Gordon, and coming up is Ben and another player called Dannon. We've got 2 doubles partnerships there who will be in the Paralympics, who play together a lot. So if you look out of the Grand Slams recently to prepare for the Paralympics now, only at the minute the Paralympic qualification has been released, and there's only 1 quad qualified, and that's Andy Lapthorne. I'm sure they'll release the wildcards very soon. But if you look at the tour as a whole, when we're not looking at the Grand Slam stage, Lapo and Greg Slade play a lot together, and they're very successful, actually. They do really well. Greg's currently ranked 18th or 19th in the world. So so the way the Paralympic qualification works with the quads division, it's the top 12 automatically qualify, and then the rest can apply for wildcards, basically. With the men, I think it's something like 30 something. With the women, it's 20 something who automatically qualify. And so you're looking at, in the men's division, British tennis fans have been very lucky in that we've got Alfie and Gordon at the same time, and we have a lovely doubles partnership that's been there, and they play every Grand Slam together, which means they're perfectly in tune for the Paralympics. This is the same with the Dutch in the quads division. As soon as Sam and Niels were consistently getting into Grand Slams, and that was helped by because people will remember that not too long ago there were only 4 quads in the Grand Slams, so it was only the top 4 quads. So you were looking at Dylan, Lapo, Wags, and Sam or Niels, dependent on where they were. Now, obviously, Sam and Niels fight for the number 1 and 2 spot. The battle for the 1 and 2 spot in the quads is real between them two. But I think it's been helped by the draw increase to 8 in the quads division, because that allowed Sam and Niels to get in there and to start forming that partnership. But it doesn't have to be country. I mean, with Dida, we've seen a mix in the Grand Slams. Sometimes she's been partnered with Jiska. Sometimes she's been partnered with Aniek. I think that's probably the Dutch Tennis Federation playing with combinations ready for, and they've also got Lizzie de Grief now in the Grand Slams, so they've been able to play with combinations ahead of the Paralympics in the women's. So they've played a bit with combinations over who goes with who and stuff to see what garners success and stuff. But as I say, it doesn't need to be fellow countrymen. I mean, you look at the relationship that Yui had with Jordan Wiley for a long time. It was great. It was lovely. It was funny. It was funny. I love that. Them two as a partnership were just comedy gold, I'll say. Because it used to be like Yui didn't used to be able to speak much English. So in press conferences, when it was the English questions, Geordie did all the answering of questions. And then when the Japanese journalists were on, Geordie just had to sit there and Yui did all the Japanese. And so the pair of them would sit there in a doubles conference, one of them answering one load of questions and one last thing. Yui used to always try though, like she used to be brilliant. And Geordie actually helped Yui with her English. So they were quite good, and this Yui, and I'm almost upset, not angry, but upset that either KG isn't Japanese or Yui isn't South African, because I would love to see them in the Paralympics as a pairing. That's not going to happen. I know. No. I'm like, could one of you just change your nationality? They're not going to. Could one of you just change your nationalities, please, so that we can just have you as a partnership in the Paralympics? Because I just think it would be on that stage to see them two as a partnership together, because the Grand Slam stage is a huge one, but equally the Paralympics is a huge one for wheelchair tennis players. I know within pedestrian tennis, the Olympics isn't viewed as important,
right.
But within wheelchair tennis, the Paralympics is viewed as important. Because it is that showcase. It is that point that, you know, you can still go to press conferences when the wheelchair players win at Grand Slams and have barely any people to just one person there. Sure. The Paralympics, the whole eyes of the world are on that multi-sport event, and many of them are probably watching wheelchair tennis. So that hopefully bleeds through. I think, unfortunately, with there not being able to be crowds at Tokyo, and then obviously Rio dropped the ball a bit with the Paralympic buzz after London 2012. I think it will be interesting to see what the momentum is after this year's Paralympics, because quite frankly, as a reporter, I'm going to be honest, you see the buzz around the sports for about 2 or 3 weeks after the Paralympics, and then they're just forgotten for another 4 years. And that is even within wheelchair tennis. There's even not, you know, I've had excuses like my mum is quite forward. So she just asked people, why aren't you turning up? It's not me, it's my mum. She's in the breastfeeding, why aren't you turning up? We just had a British winner. And people say, oh, well, we've only got 2 people in the team, so we can't, if a big match is on in the pedestrian tennis, we can't send somebody to report on, to interview the wheelchair tennis player who's just won. That's actually been said to me and my mum. And I'm like, I'm sat here as one person, mate, and I manage every single wheelchair match, as well as keeping on top of the ATP and WTA matches. So don't use you have 2 people as an excuse, because I'm one person with no hand function and wobbly legs. You can do it. And, you know, things like that have been said. And what I want to see after this year's Paralympics is not that 3-year honeymoon that then nothing happens until the next 4 years, till LA in 2028. I don't want to see that 3-week honeymoon. I want to see a 4-year honeymoon. I don't want to be the Jack in the Box reporter, just like the athletes don't want to be the Jack in the Box athletes who are suddenly in media demand every 4 years, and then plugs away the rest of the time. You know, these athletes, these tennis players are plugging away, 50 weeks of the year every year. And so I think the Paralympics, being involved in the Paralympic Games, carries a bit more weight within the wheelchair tennis world. And I know that within the Olympics, there's been a number of players drop out of the Olympics because it's a changing surface too soon and stuff like that. The wheelchair players have a little bit longer because it doesn't start, Paralympics don't start till the 27th of August. So the wheelchair players have a little tiny bit longer to kind of get used to surfaces. So
are you going?
I am going. I will be in Paris from the 26th of August. I will be there for the whole duration.
Wow.
Watching everything as it unfolds as it happens.
Are you pumped?
I am a little bit, because actually, as a reporter, my Paralympic history has been Rio, where, that was interesting.
You went to Rio, cool.
Rio, which was interesting, but Tokyo.
Why was it interesting? Because of organisation?
yeah, and it just was felt like for a long time we didn't know whether the Paralympics were going to happen because there'd been a lot of money spent on the Olympics and
Ah,
the rectification of the green pool, the famous green
yes,
pool.
yes, famous green. Yeah.
And you know, and up until, you know, you didn't really 100% know whether it was going to happen, so you weren't allowed that buzz, that
Ah,
that build up, even as a reporter, to know. And then Tokyo, obviously, pandemic happened. I was doing it from, you know, I was reporting on it from my room, a small
yeah.
room in my house. Because the restrictions to go over there, we were allowed to go over there as press, but the restrictions were so strict that actually I had to look at it and say realistic terms as a wheelchair user. So things like if your hotel had, it was things like if your hotel had the ability to cater, so it had a restaurant, you had to eat in there all the time.
Okay.
And then, but then if it didn't, you were allowed out, but you were only allowed out for a set time to go and get a piece of food, and then you had to be back. And if you broke that time limit, and I was sitting there thinking, as a wheelchair user, I'm sorry, you can't put non-disabled time limits on somebody pushing a wheelchair in a city,
Sure.
which may or may not have step-free access at the nearest convenience store that you go to. So for me, I made the decision to report from home. We were offered that choice, and I made that decision just logistically. So that was that was an incredibly weird Paralympics. And it was incredibly weird to watch as well because they didn't have crowds. So you were watching the sport on TV with absolutely no crowd. So whereas the Grand Slams had gone ahead, they'd started to reintroduce crowds, hadn't they? So you were kind of
Yeah.
watching it on the streaming, but you were seeing crowds and reactions. The
Yeah.
tennis, I've never watched tennis being played with no crowd reaction to good shots. And I was like, it was the weirdest thing. It was like somebody had put my streaming on mute, if I'm honest, and I was checking my volume levels. It was, I can't imagine what it was like for the athletes out there, no matter what sport they did. I mean, there's some sports, wheelchair rugby, wheelchair basketball, where the crowds really get, I can't imagine for the athletes how weird that will have been to be in like a very small, to be in these big arenas that had been built way before the pandemic happened, expecting millions of people to turn up, and then they're just empty. I don't even want to, because I bet it was weird.
Fortunately, it won't be like that in Paris.
No, we're going to have crowds. We're going to have crowds. And one thing I will say about the French tennis crowds, they get behind their French tennis players. So if any of our Brits are playing French tennis players, or if anybody's playing a French tennis player, just be prepared for loud. It's going to happen. And it's, it was evident in Roland Garros. And what excites me about the French team as well, the French wheelchair team are captained by none other than Yannick Noah.
Oh, really? Okay.
That is who is captaining the French wheelchair tennis team. Of all the people they could choose, that's a legend there, right there, captain. It shows as well the seriousness the French are taking the Paralympics with them hosting it. To have somebody like Yannick Noah. And one thing I would say about Yannick Noah that I was really impressed by, he knew about his captaincy. We knew about his captaincy. It was announced during Roland Garros. Mm-hmm. And he sat there. I think he had a broken leg. He was in a wheelchair himself when he was at Roland Garros. And I think he'd broken his leg or something. And he was there at every match involving the French players, watching them, surveying them, working out where their strengths and weaknesses were, so that he can properly help them as they bid to get a medal on home soil. And I think that was so that I give Yannick Noah an applause, because I have never seen that in Roland Garros before the Paralympics. I have never seen that, and that was like, wow, yeah. He gets it. He gets the culture behind wheelchair tennis. And he's going to be, even if the French don't win any medals, I think you've got to think there's a serious chance in Stefan Houdet. He's at his home games. He's going to bring his A game. But even if they don't, the culture behind that team and the captaincy of that team is in the right place, from somebody who is committed to helping that team succeed.
Well, Gemma, I have got to get going myself, and I know you've got a full day ahead. Oh, by the way, how was Busted?
Oh, Busted was amazing. I finally got tickets. I only found out, so it was the Friday of Wimbledon that I found out that I could get tickets. I'd been waiting. If anybody's listened to my radio show, I've been going on and on for 8
Well, I was
weeks.
about to say, we can obviously find you in various other spots, including I'm showing your Twitter page right now, but on British radio as well, right?
Yeah, so I'm on to, so next week's my final week of doing Total Sport for BBC Radio Cambridgeshire. I've had an absolute blast of a summer. It's been crazy. It's been doing a job that many in the industry told me I'd never be able to do because of the level of my disability. It's all because of who's behind it. Like I've mentioned Yannick Noah there, but I have to say all credit to Terry Underhill and Peter Swan, who are the editors at BBC Cambridgeshire. They took me, they allowed me the time, to think, when I started, I had somebody else controlling the desk because I didn't know whether my hands were going to work correctly on it and whether I was going to make some monumental error. They had somebody else controlling the desk, but they had me in for training. They had me in for getting my muscle memory, remembering where I need to go at certain points. And, these last few weeks, I've been controlling that desk by myself within 5-8 weeks. I have to say that what I've achieved on BBC Cambridgeshire this 10-12 weeks has been because of the people behind me as well, because you can only succeed if you've got kind of like a team of cheerleaders behind you who believe you can do it, even at times when you don't. So that is Terry Underhill, Peter Swan, and also Matt Webb, my producer, and Emily Jarvis, my broadcast assistant. The four of them have been in my corner as my cheerleaders, even when I did one show with concussion. I did, yeah. It was after the first week of Wimbledon. I got hit with a rucksack on Henman Hill in the head, and I ended up with concussion. It was Guy who was just basically, and I always say the wheelchair diet is the best diet in the world. I lost 12 kilos. I lost 12 stone in seconds because that guy did the age-old thing of, oh, sorry, I didn't see you. And I'm like, there's 12 stone of me. You can see me. And I got hit in the head. So I ended up doing one show with concussion, which meant my whole coordination went. And do you know what? All four of those have been in my corner. So I can't thank them enough. I'm waiting to see what's next. I'm waiting to have confirmed what's next. There are ideas floating around, which I can't reveal yet. So, but in and out of the world of tennis. So if you've listened to the show during the summer, I've covered football, I've covered golf, covered boxing yesterday, covered cricket and all other sports that nobody's really heard me talk about in the thing. And yes, I did become a armchair critic of England during the Euros. Mainly because I'm a Newcastle fan and I just wanted Anthony Gordon on, and you know what? But
didn't get enough minutes, maybe.
No, he didn't get enough minutes, and so it's so it's to them, to the because they've watched me on things like this. They've watched me on things like they've heard me on the news panel at BBC Cambridgeshire, and they decided to give me a chance, and it was a big risk because you give a quadriplegic a chance like that, and it is a big risk, and I know, and anything can happen. But that would be my message to anybody. If you're sitting here watching it and somebody's told you you won't be able to do something, just try the system, test the system a bit and see if it is possible, because that's what I've done all my career. That's what these wheelchair tennis players do. They test the system and say people will come if you extend the draw, and look what's happened. Just whether you're disabled or not, if people have said you can't do something, try and find the can in that can't, and let's see what happens.
Gemma, I think that's a great note to end on. Thanks for coming on again, and we'll be catching up again soon.
Yes, no, definitely. Probably Paralympics.
I know you're going to be very busy in the next few weeks doing your spots before Paris, but maybe we can have a chat post Paris if you have time.
Yeah, definitely. Absolutely no problems.
All right, Gemma, thanks very much. And to everybody else, thanks for tuning in. And you know the drill.
If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell so you don't miss out on